Yes, sir.
Test, 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 test. Call the meeting to order. Regular City Council meeting for the City of American Canyon for August 20th, 2024. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Miriam Abadamos is excused. Councilmember Mark Joseph.
Here.
Councilmember Pierre Washington.
Here.
Vice Mayor David Oro.
Here.
Mayor Leon Garcia.
Here. We'll move on now to report on closed session. Confirmation of reportable action. Mr. Ross.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the public, the council convened an open session at 5:30 to address the matters agendized for closed session consideration. After hearing that there were no public comments on closed session, the council also received a recommendation from our office that, consistent with Government Code Section 54954.2B, 2 additional items be added to anticipated litigation. The approval of that was met the requirements of the code section I just referenced. It was a 4-0 vote. Those 2 additional items were with respect to the proposed Native American Casino at the intersection of State Route 35 and Interstate 80 East, adjacent to the city of Vallejo, and consideration of the airport land use plan and its impacts on the city. With respect to each of the items considered in closed session, with the exception of what I'm going to announce later, I will prepare a written report upon return from closed session, consistent with the provisions of Government Code Section 54957.1B. I do want to make an announcement with respect to the additional matter added to closed session consideration dealing with the proposed Indian casino. With respect to that, the council authorized, and the vote was 4-0, that our office prepare a comment on the environmental assessment associated with that document, requesting continuance for the ability to comment additionally on the sufficiency of that document. In addition to that matter, I would like to announce, with respect to existing items of litigation 2C and 2E, which are known respectively as the Watson Lane litigation, as well as Measure K, Watson Lane and Golden State, that with respect to those, more than 180 days has gone by with respect to a settlement which achieved the dismissal of Center for Biological Diversity from each of those actions. That settlement, among other things, required the city to enact greenhouse gas provisions in its municipal code, which were accomplished in February and March of this year. That would conclude the report upon return from closed session, unless there are questions.
Any questions from council?
No, sir.
Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Ross. Council will proceed with our agenda. Proclamations and presentations, we have none this evening. We're now at public comment on items on closed session or on open session. Items not on closed session or open session. Have we received any comments?
I have received no comments, but I have one hand raised online.
Okay.
I have Terry McGrath. Go ahead, Terry.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council
Good evening.
members. I'm Terrence McGrath, owner-developer of Watson Ranch. I'm calling in this evening to discuss Measure U. As you know, Measure U would replace Measure T, so it's not a new tax. It would generate approximately $1.2 billion over a 30-year period. Of that amount, there's $56 million takedown for highway and emergency evacuation projects, which the extension of Newell Drive would be potentially an eligible candidate. Over the life of the measure, American Canyon and Napa County are projected to receive $522 million. While most of the revenues are committed to local streets and road rehab, the measure permits also jurisdictions to use 5% of their revenues on other transportation projects, which equates to approximately $26 million. So what's the backstory? Backstory is I met 3 years ago, almost to the day, with state, county, and American Canyon elected officials, city and county staff, as well as NVTA. It was a rainy, late September, October day, and the purpose was to discuss the extension of Newell Drive. Since then, nothing, I'm going to repeat, nothing has been done by the city or county to further the process with Newell Drive. Meanwhile, I bought Paoli property several years ago for millions of dollars for several reasons, not the least of which was to make sure the Newell right-of-way was secured. From the end of end of the intersection at Mallon Way in the Watson Ranch project all the way up to Green Island Road. The folks behind Measure U are now asking me to make a large donation to the campaign efforts because they're struggling to raise funds. I'm happy to help further if I can get the city's commitment to put Newell at the top of the priority list. As most of you know, Watson Ranch is a reality today, 3 years after we started construction in July of 2021. That said, I cannot reach the full potential. I cannot reach the full potential of the Ruins Hotel, as well as the Event and Entertainment Center without Newell Drive becoming a reality. On a separate note, my team is working diligently and spending lots and lots and lots of time and money with CFNR, with UPRR, and ultimately CPUC to make the railroad crossing at Real Del Mar a reality. The reason I'm calling tonight, I'm asking you, the American Canyon City Council, to make the extension of Newell Drive a priority. Thank you for listening, and I hope you and your colleagues at the Napa County Supervisor level, along with NVTA, will make Newell Drive the #1 transportation improvement in American Canyon in 2025 and 2026. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have any other comment?
I have no other hands raised.
Anybody in the audience wishing to comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment at this time. We'll move on with our agenda. Agenda changes. We have a consent calendar. If there are no requests to withdraw a matter to discuss, I'll take a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Motion second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Joseph,
Yes.
Councilmember Washington,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Oro,
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Yes, thank you, council. Moving on to public hearings. There are no public hearings this evening. We're moving on now to business items. Number 7, Green Island Road Project CFD financing.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item tonight is another important milestone in the Green Island Road project. The Green Island Road industrial area is at the north edge of town, and the main road in and out. Green Island Road is in need of repair, and this project has been underway for quite some time. The property owners out there several years ago agreed to assess themselves additional property taxes to help pay for the cost of reconstructing Green Island Road, along with repaving and reconstructing many of the side roads within the district. We formed what was known as the community facilities districts, and a couple of years ago we issued the first set of bonds to undertake the first phase of this project, which involved undergrounding utility wires on Green Island Road. PG&E has now completed that task. We've also widened the railroad crossings on Green Island Road with new concrete panels. And so the remaining undergrounding work that needs to take place is for AT&T to underground their telephonic cables. Those cables will go under conduits in the ground. But in the meantime, while that work is still pending, we're ready to move forward with the main event, I guess you would say. So the project will reconstruct Green Island Road in many of the side streets. It widens it to 3 lanes. It puts a Class 1 bicycle path on the north side of the road, and makes substantial improvements at the intersections as well. So we've been to this council numerous times, with different explanations of the project. And tonight's item in particular relates to the financing. So we've identified federal funding, we've identified state funding, we've put in local funding to this project, and the last funding in will be the bonds, the proceeds from the bonds that we're seeking the authority to go and issue. So kind of a formality tonight. The council has previously signaled its interest in moving this project forward with that in mind, and we did it previously with phase 1. We do have some folks in the audience tonight. If you did have any questions about financial markets or processes for bonds or that sort of thing, we have with Piper Sandler, we have representatives from Piper Sandler who will be facilitating the bond sale. Representatives from Jones Hall with bond counsel are on the line. Our municipal advisor, NHA, is available, along with our folks from our special tax administrator at NBS. All can answer some of the nitty-gritty questions about financing. The bottom line is that the debt service payments from these property owners that accumulate on their property taxes each year are sufficient to pay for the debt service on the bonds that we're proposing. We do hopefully anticipate some remaining funds that will allow for maintenance activities once the project is complete. So we've factored in some services components there as well. But time will tell, depending on the cost of the construction project. I'll note only we do have a project labor agreement that's for citywide projects with our friends in the construction trades, and this project would be a project that would be subject to that project labor agreement. So, an important project for us and for them as it relates to moving those kind of things forward. So, I was trying to see if there's anything else in the staff report. Only that some specifics around the road reconstruction itself. A similar type of construction activity to what we saw out at Benton here recently, what's known as full depth reclamation, but we're reconstructing these roads with the long term in mind, particularly the heavy trucks that are out there. So we're going to remove the asphalt, we're going to dig deep into the subgrade, lime treat, replace, add aggregate from the existing asphalt that's there, grind it up and put it back, and then put nice layers of fresh asphalt on top. So it's kind of a recycled version of that, but you create a very strong base with cement and with these existing materials out there. Instead of having to remove all of it and import all brand new sections, it's a sort of way of recycling in place, but kind of pushing it to the bottom and then putting a new fresh layer on the top. So those elements are all in place. A thicker section, but a comparable treatment to what was done more recently over on Benton Way. And in the packet are a variety of resolutions, a preliminary offering statement, a lot of the details that's required to go to the marketplace and solicit offers for these bonds. If you had any specific questions about that, we have the team here to answer those questions. If you have any specifics about the project, I'd be happy to answer those. And we request authority to move forward with the debt issuance.
Okay. Questions from council, Vice Mayor Oro?
Yeah, just one question. I'm glad you got the whole financial world ready to take this question. Talk to me about what you guys are seeing in the market and, should we have bonded if it was possible a couple years ago? I'm sure the market is different, and what kind of rates are we looking at and expecting in terms of selling this to the marketplace?
Yeah, I'll let some of our financial guys come up and kind of answer the questions about, what the marketplace kind of looks like today. The question about should we have gone out sooner, certainly if we had a crystal ball, maybe, but having an understanding about, if you issue debt too far in advance, you still have to start making those debt payments. So, once just like you get a mortgage, close to 30 days later, you got to start paying that mortgage. So you want to time your debt issuances to be really close to construction. Had we issued debt, a couple of years ago in a lower interest rate environment, we would have been paying interest on that, on work on debt that we didn't quite need yet. So, it's certainly a catch-22 there, but I'll let Ralph kind of talk about what the market looks like right now.
Sure. Thanks a lot. So in terms of the municipal market, it's actually been really
You may
good.
want to tip that microphone up a little higher.
Green or what? Oh, tip it higher. I'm sorry. Pardon me. Can you hear me better?
Yes, thank you,
All right.
sir.
Pardon me. So the municipal market has actually improved quite a bit. Rates have really run down in the last 6 months. We had a run up in rates, especially in this kind of financing, which is land secured financing. 2 years ago, you'd be looking at 625, 650 in terms of interest rate on bonds like these. Right now, we're looking at less than 5%. So the market's been good. There's a lot of money specifically for this kind of product right now. And, the municipal market is really a supply-demand market. And there's such a shortage of municipal bonds right now. Yeah.
Ralph, do you want to talk a little bit at how the marketplace might view the Green Island area? And it's a little bit different. We're having a session today, a due diligence session, and a lot of what's in the marketplace are more residential type projects, but this one being a little more unique, being its kind of area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we sell a lot of land secure financing, CFD type financing. Typically, you structure them around new home developments like Watson Ranch, for example. They've got a CFD that they've structured for that financing or for that development. This is different because it's mostly industrial, and so there's a whole different story to tell. And our story really is talking about the Napa Valley location and what's going on out there, what the uses are of the property. It's also interesting because the majority, we're structuring this around developed properties, and so that sells really well. In terms of investors, I'll just jump to that. We'll be looking at mutual funds, we're looking at money managers, and we'll look at high net worth individuals who want to buy these bonds.
Yeah, okay, so now you got my head spinning. We also have a big project. It's called Highway 29 here. And we'll be discussing a little bit of the design features after you leave this evening. And the whole idea around the Broadway District Specific Plan, which is Highway 29, is to beautify that highway and also make it multimodal. Our challenge is that it is owned by the state of California. It's a Caltrans highway. However, there are edges on there that could be beautified. Right, taking down the power lines, building sidewalks, making it multimodal for bike lanes, etc. We had talked in the past about possibly bonding or funding that money and then making it back to develop or paying it back as development happens. And so basically this whole thing has had an environmental impact report and investment is coming in. But it's coming in piecemeal per se. I think residents and us, and particularly me, would like to see that accelerated, particularly the beautification part. Is that something that could be bondable and done in a way? I mean, is there a possibility for that? And I'm talking to a finance guy. My city manager has given me different answers, but I want to know what else you could sell for us. Thank you.
So I'd say, first of all, we need to learn more about the project for sure. It's sort of
I gave you enough
detail.
high-level detail
But-
possibilities.
Always you can look at it and see if there's a revenue source to pay for it. And, that's what it comes down to is, how are you going to pay for it? Because, you have to pay for the bonds. And so, I'm not sure what the intent is. I mean, you could do a CFD, but property owners have to want to do that. They have to vote for it. And, in terms of, the city itself as general fund, you've got other things that you also have to pay for. So the things you balance out.
Okay. Thank
It's a
you.
great city manager answer. I mean, to that point, and to distinguish it with Green Island, the exhaustive effort we did to form the CFD from developed properties was with a coalition of primary landowners out there and them spearheading it. And you take it takes a 2/3 vote to do that, and they voted to self-assess them. So the dynamics on the highway quite a bit different. And to Ralph's point, a dedicated revenue source would be needed before the market said, okay, we think you can pay those things back, those bonds, that is. But it is a possibility. And NHA is our municipal advisor, and they could be the ones that would be helping us kind of strategize that and then bring something to Ralph's group to try and sell.
Councilmember Washington.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question, or actually statement, is more directed to you, Mr. Holly. I'm excited about this project, and I love celebration. So I was just curious, if there's some plans for maybe a groundbreaking celebration for the community to enjoy and celebrate, this actually what I call a special event, very special event for us.
Yeah, we love celebrations too, and it's a long time coming. So we'll get some things in the works. We got to get some other boxes checked and get some other deliverables completed. But yeah, that's definitely on our mind, and we'll be mindful of when we want to do that. But we did have a groundbreaking for the first phase, and the nice folks at Sutter Home accommodated us in their parking lot. And so, yeah, we'll be thinking about a groundbreaking for this phase because of how monumental it is, inviting the businesses who've, again, voted to assess themselves, additional taxes. And then, yeah, we'll be looking at a ribbon cutting eventually when the work gets complete.
A job well done by you and all involved. Thank you.
Councilmember Joseph.
Yes, well, I'm excited to see this is finally getting here. It has taken a long, long time. So my question is, do we have, looking at our latest budget, are we anticipating monies left over from the original 14 million, or is there, does the CFD have people paying enough of an assessment to cover the bond and a little left over for maintenance and landscaping?
We have a certain amount of PAYGO that's been paid to date. So that's one of our funding sources. That's property owners have been paying property tax this entire time. So we have that. That's the sources of funds. And then we have the prospective debt service that will cover the bonds. Right. Depending on the amount of uses that we have, we hope to have some additional fund balance there. Plus, depending on the amount of the bonds, there may be some in the annual installment that would be set aside for maintenance. So we're not 100% sure. We're going to have to kind of balance that out. We're going to go to some next steps. We have a pricing call next Tuesday, and we're going to market next Wednesday. So after those things happen, we'll have a better sense of what the marketplace said, and then we're going to start to have a better sense of what's available in our sources, and from there, what the uses are going to be.
And so then on the expense side, we have 100% drawings at this point, or 90, or?
I would characterize them as 99.5%
okay.
drawings.
Fair enough.
We're refining things, a last minute ad, and in fact, your consent item tonight related to, in Hannah Court, particularly the water line. We're making sure that water line is going to stand the test of time, and that was a concern. So that's been kind of the latest push, is to get that water line designed so that we're not, again, paving roads and tearing them up to fix a water line. So that's I would say we're not 100%.
Were we able to plug in a class 4 lane on Commerce, or what kind of multimodal options do we have on Commerce Boulevard?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't remember, Erica, what did we end up doing at Commerce? Do you want to come up and talk about what the design at Commerce is looking like right now?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Community, American Canyon. Erica Almond-Smithies, Public Works Director. As far as we're talking about the bike boulevard and closing the gap on a sidewalk, that's what we're trying to provide on Commerce to connect to the existing trail. The one pinch area we have is at the bridge crossing that then connects to the south side of Commerce, where we have Class 2 bike lanes, and then eventually to the Class 1 trail. But north of the bridge, we looked at several cross sections to get down there, either one-sided two-way Class 4 and or standard Class 2 bike lanes, and completing a sidewalk gap, because there's currently no sidewalk north of that bridge area. So I believe we landed at, I'd have to confirm on our design, that the sidewalk was going in on Commerce and then the Class 2 bike lanes. But with some sort of buffer in there for either protective barrier or sharrows at this, or the the buffer lane of 2 feet.
Because right now, despite the no parking signs, there's big trucks that use it as parking. So if there was some way to create something that keeps trucks, even if they're, I don't know, if there's some way to keep them out of there so that bike cyclists have a better option. I mean, theoretically, we're creating a network in such a manner that people could, if they lived around here, could easily take a bike to work if they worked in the industrial park. We want to make that as safe and as encouraging as we can. So,
That is the goal.
okay.
Yeah, will there be no parking with those, with the Class 2 lanes? Is that where it's going with that?
I
with
have
the
to get
buffered
back
lanes?
on there, except it's a wide stretch of road, but it wasn't wide enough to do the Class 1 and on-street park and biking.
Yeah, so the challenge with multi-directional Class 4 on one side is you have to have a transition point back, and so particularly at the bridge, because the bridge is so narrow that it really only lends itself to Class 2s. So you have one, for one direction that would be fine, but for the one that's not that direction, they have to go back and forth. So
Yeah.
that's where we kind of landed with the one direction on each side, but recognizing that you have these large vehicles and bicyclists, just a regular Class 2, probably too narrow. So we're looking at buffered versions where that it's wider, and then you have either striped or physical barriers that keep people out of that Class 2. So it's a buffer.
Kind of a skinny Class 4.
Well, Class 4 is specifically two directional, so Class 2 is one directional. So it's comparable almost in width to a 4, but only one direction. I think
Okay.
that's the piece. Call it a luxurious Class 2 as far as
Luxurious
width.
too?
Yes.
Okay.
And what's meaningful when it comes to a 18-wheeler truck as far as a protection area, so.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, an 18-wheeler's going to win over a bike contest every time.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, like I said, my interest is just to do whatever we can to facilitate cyclists.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just raised an interesting point for me. How's the bicycle connection now? I haven't been there for a long time between Wetlands Edge and Commerce, I think it is.
In front of 4-H, the path there.
That is complete. The trail from Eucalyptus to, yes, it's complete now.
It's complete. Good. Oh, I'm gonna have to go check that one out. Thank you. No, I'm just really appreciate the fact that this is coming together. It's been a long time, and I know we have been trying to maintain it as much as we can, but I've had comments from truck operators over there about the damage that the trucks experience. It's just bouncing into potholes and what. Some said it cost them thousands of dollars just to do the repair work. So this is a good thing coming forward, and I look forward to having that completed. We should do some sort of a celebration. Probably I should have one on Benton Way too, because that looks, people are really liking it. On the first day of school, I usually go down and check out how the traffic in school is doing, and heard some very good comments. But
Yeah, maybe we'll do something in the morning over there, Ben.
Yeah.
Like when we get the striping done, we are putting a rapid flashy blinky out there.
There you
So, maybe we'll do a kind of, maybe a Wednesday morning or a Friday morning donut ribbon cutting / thing at the middle school
There
for
you
the
go.
road.
all right. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Anything further from the council? Are we ready for public comment?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Erica.
public comment is now open. Do you have anybody online?
I have no speaker cards and no hands raised.
Okay. Anybody in the audience wishing to comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. We'll turn back to council for further discussion, desired action. There's
Yep.
some matters we need to take care of here.
Yep, if there's no further comment, I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2024, authorizing the, next in order, authorizing the issuance and sale of special tax bonds for and on behalf of the City of American Canyon Community Facilities District number 2018-1 Green Island Road Project, and approving agreements related to the issuance and sale of such bonds, a preliminary official statement, and other related documents and actions.
I'll second.
Motion second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Joseph,
Yes.
Councilmember Washington,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Oro,
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Yes. Thank you, council.
That's all.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you,
We
guys.
Appreciate you gentlemen being here this evening. Thank you.
Get that money.
That's it's a Jerry Maguire thing. Show me the money. Okay, moving on now to item number 8. Voting delegates and alternate for League of California Cities 2024 Annual Business Meeting.
Great. Mayor and Council, we annually bring this item to you when the Cal Cities event, the Cal Cities Annual Conference and Expo will be held on October 16th to the 18th. The General Assembly Annual Business Meeting is scheduled for Friday, October 18th. At this meeting, that's where the league membership considers and takes action on resolutions that establish league policy. At this time, we will select a voting delegate and up to 2 alternates who will be attending and able to vote in the event that the designated voting delegate is unable to serve in that capacity.
Okay. So who is attending? I am.
I'm not.
And I'm not.
I'm speaking there,
Oh.
Mercy me.
Yeah, rub it in.
but I am only there for that day. So I fly in on Wednesday,
Yeah.
and I have to leave on Friday morning, so I can't attend the part where they vote. But I suppose I could be an alternate.
Okay.
But if you're not there, man, I don't know for voting. I would nominate you as the voting delegate,
Thank you.
Mayor Garcia.
10.
I'd second that nomination.
Okay.
And
Roll call, please.
Okay.
You accept?
Yep. Just sorry, just one
Yep.
second here.
yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Joseph,
Yes.
Councilmember Washington,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Oro,
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Council. And the alternative?
I'll be on call alternate. I mean, I'm the only one that would make
Yeah.
sense.
I'll make a motion that Vice Mayor Oro is the on-call alternate.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Joseph,
Yes.
Councilmember Washington,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Oro,
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Yes. Thank you, Council. Moving on, management staff oral reports.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think we have any management or staff reports tonight. I know we want to take a little bit of a recess before we jump into our 7:30, but we're done. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor, council comments, committee reports? Anything to report, council?
I guess mine is more of a future agenda item, so I guess
Okay,
I'll
we'll wait for that one then.
defer.
Councilmember Washington?
Yeah, just 2 quick reports that we attended, myself and you, Mr. Mayor, the 30th anniversary for celebration for Holy Family. We had over 700 parishioners out there, which was a really successful event. Yeah, that was all I have for that. I have something for future agenda, though.
Okay. Vice Mayor Oro? Well, likewise, it's been a busy week. Did have a, I'll add it to my next meeting report. That's what I'll do. So we'll conclude at that. Okay, did you have something further, Councilmember Joseph? Future items?
Yes, kind of following up on Terry McGrath's comments, I would like to see him support Measure U, of course, but I'd also like to bring back or have staff bring back a discussion on Newell Extension, probably in 2 areas, one being the challenges that go with that project. As I've mentioned to the manager, it's not as easy as saying, let's just build a road. There's railroads, there's creeks, there's all kinds of issues.
Yes,
So
of course.
a general discussion of all the complications associated with that project so that the public understands it's not as easy as, here's the check for the money, let's start building a road. And then the second part is simply saying, despite those challenges, how do we make it happen? And do we talk about including the county? Because, they obviously have a portion of Newell from Green Island to South Kelly. So, and NVTA can play a role. I've been there long enough to be able to probably repeat Kate Miller's explanations, but Despite that, I think, it's something we need to do sooner rather than later. And given Measure U's urgency as far as being on the November ballot, if we could bring something back, even if it's at a high level, at a policy level, not getting into the nuts and bolts as much, but a discussion on it would be important.
I would second that.
I think I certainly signed on in support of the measure for the ballot. I think I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Joseph. I think the thing for me also to stress is a safety issue, an evacuation route.
Exactly.
And way of getting our emergency equipment north of the county. It just takes one little backup on 29 north of Paoli Loop, and the whole thing shuts down.
Mm-hmm.
I think the important thing for me is with respect to the county and all the other jurisdictions, particularly North County, this is the way we all connect. And
Exactly.
it's essential for us in terms of public safety and for transportation of goods and employees to and from work. And I think the congestion on the highway has gotten far worse given the cost of housing going up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Had a report back or comment back from Mayor McConnell of Vallejo, who attended the State Route 37 meeting. Traffic count has gone up from 50,000 cars a day to 72. If you look at the road there at 12 and 29, it's most of that congestion is folks going home from work because affordable housing is out now in Vacaville and Fairfield. By the way, another comment would be that State Route 29 South School interchange. What a difference.
Yeah.
Wow. That is, I've gone through it several times, and it's just, I'm getting ready to move over to the far right lane so I can get to South School, and wait a second, no, there's no backup. It's just you go.
Yeah.
I do think we need to have some, see how it settles in, but it seems to be a little training for people on how you utilize a traffic circle. Who has to yield and who has the right to continue driving. It's happened several times. Somebody will stop in the circle to allow about 6 or 7 cars come in on the yield side, and then everything's all backed up and gets chaotic. Maybe that gets better over time, but if perhaps there is, as the chair of the MBTA, Mr. Joseph, thank you.
We're working on it.
Maybe there's a video that could be put out on websites on
Might
how
be.
to use that. That would conclude my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Washington, you have another one?
Did we need to vote on that last
Yeah.
one or no?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes.
I'll accept a motion to that effect as
It is
Yeah.
comment.
seconded.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Okay. This is
So
to-
it's I understand. I'll repeat back what I understand. Let's make sure we're on the same page. Informational update on Newell Drive, current status, challenges, opportunities.
Yeah.
And succinct.
and potential partnerships with
Sure.
the
Yes,
county,
exactly.
NVTA, and others.
Yeah.
That's where I was going to fold.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, generally, is how do we help make it happen? It's really what it's
Exactly.
all about.
I
Yes.
think putting it on the next NICLOG agenda might be helpful too, by the way.
The NICLOG agenda for October has already been
Kinda locked up.
established, so
Yeah.
this won't be on there for that.
And,
But
and to be honest, this is more of a South County issue, so the city and the county are probably
Build
the
it, yes,
two
I think the
players.
benefit is the whole county.
That's true. And certainly we can get that message out, but
Yeah.
But for now, I'm looking at, we need to do this in September or October just because of the timing,
Understood.
but, okay. Thank you.
yes, so we'll do a roll call. So we had, it
Roll
was
call, please.
Mark, Mark made the motion, David made the second, I believe.
Councilmember Joseph,
Yes.
Councilmember Washington,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Oro,
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Yes, thank you all.
I have one thing.
And we have concluded our,
I have one more thing. for
Okay.
future.
Councilmember Washington.
Yeah, what I wanted to kind of request was to put on the agenda, when we had Meet Me in the Street this last time, which was a great event, some of the feedback that I got from people that were ADA required users were having difficulty going from one side of the street to the other side of the street. And I'd like to know if there's a way that we could make cut-throughs on the mediums throughout that little area to allow some of the people with ADA restrictions to be able to get through the medium that go down to the street.
I think I saw one where with a movable ramp. or
Yeah,
what-
there is one
Yeah.
with kind of a temporary ADA ramp, say midway in the street.
Yeah,
And
but I think we could look at putting
Yeah.
more of those in place.
It's just some of the feedback that I got from some of the people that require.
And I appreciate the feedback. Well, not necessarily a policy issue there. Let me take a look at what we've already put in place and see what other opportunities we have and
Alright.
how to maybe illustrate it for folks. Because if you're in that big event and there's one in one spot, you may not necessarily know that it's so big,
Yeah.
such a
Right,
big
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So yeah, we'll take a look at it. Not necessarily a
Something
policy.
colorful balloon or something.
Yeah, no, that's
Flag.
like a floating ADA balloon or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something,
Yeah.
because in that crowd, you know,
Yeah.
there may be something there, but you would, if you didn't know it was there,
No,
you
no,
might be
no.
hard pressed to find it.
yeah,
I think those folks would really appreciate that.
Yeah, no,
definitely, I know there's one. I don't know if there's more than one. And
There's-
it's a long stretch.
There's
so-
one that's temporary that we did try to implement, but,
Yeah.
and it works. It's just, I think the awareness of it is something that we can improve. So, we've had the last one already for this year, but, for next season, I think it's something that,
Well, just
can we
some of
add some
those,
additional ones
yeah.
and
Blue
how do we
handicap-
illuminate them? Or
Little handicap
signal
signs,
them?
you know?
Something,
Parking, yeah.
I'm kind of thinking it needs to be more prominent, higher up,
No, I
so
mean,
you would
yeah,
see it from
but that's-
farther
that being-
away.
Being the symbol on it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was sort of only joking about a floating ADA balloon. Like, I mean, I sort of think that might work. Something,
right.
you know, like
Okay,
10 feet in the air or something.
all right.
And then I have one more thing,
Okay.
real quick. And it was just from visiting some residents, especially the newer residents in American Canyon. A few of them have asked me about our maybe possible rebranding our American Canyon monuments at our section where we enter into the city. And it was, I know that we had some conversations about that in the past, and there's some historical stuff with the artists of the one that currently did it, and I try to explain it to some of these residents. But a lot of residents were mentioning to me that they'd like to see something that make people realize when they enter American Canyon, something that pops a little bit more. And I just thought maybe we'd go out, maybe get some ideas of maybe changing the monuments that we currently have. And that's some of the feedback. I had at least 15 residents bring that up to me.
Okay.
Yeah. I even had people say they like to see flags go all the way down, you know, when you enter American Canyon. So, I mean, I'm soliciting some of those ideas as well, but I just think that if we could maybe have staff look into maybe those possibilities.
Yeah.
I'm sure Mark's going to have some comments because this is not a new issue.
This,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
so, you know,
history time.
Yeah, well,
Life for all of us.
Yeah.
I think you focus on getting that highway prettier, which is Broadway District Specific Plan, which is our next meeting, actually, so.
Yeah, historically, the chamber undertook that project. I think a local, well, at the time he was pretty young. He's probably not young now, but an artist
It's about
developed
20,
it.
20 plus years
20
ago.
plus
yeah,
years
yeah.
ago, developed it and put it where it was at by the PG&E station. And then another one over there by, as you're coming in off of Flosden and Newell. They're 20 plus years old, so, you know, there's a part of me that would have been indignant a few years ago. Now it's like, 20, 25 years later, maybe it's time for a refresh.
Well, what's going to be the big attraction in American Canyon? It's going to be the ruins and garden,
Yeah,
the amphitheaters going on, the entertainment's going on. So maybe there's something that reflects that.
And actually, the majority of the people that mentioned it to me probably were less than 5 to 6 years here in our city.
Yeah,
So,
Well,
I'm
yeah.
just delivering the message that they're delivering to me, so.
Yeah. It does include pictures of the silos, just saying. Okay.
Okay, we have 5 minutes to our next meeting, so why don't we be adjourned now and reconvene at 7:30.
Thank you, Mayor.
Council, thank you very much. We concluded our work on this section. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Trying to hustle some Measure U dollars.
Yep. Okay.
So does this mean the planning commission's higher standard, they
Call meeting to order. Special Joint City Council Planning Commission meeting for August 20th, 2024. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Eric Altman,
Present.
Commissioner Andrew Goff, Commissioner Crystal Malare,
Present.
Vice Chair Devet Mohammed,
Present.
Chair Brando Cruz,
Present.
Councilmember Miriam Abadamas is excused. Councilmember Mark Joseph.
Here.
Councilmember Pierre Washington.
Here.
Vice Mayor David Oro.
Here.
Mayor Leon Garcia.
Here. Okay, we'll move on now to public comment. Items not on the agenda. Anybody wishing to comment? Video online?
Mayor Garcia, I have Yvonne Beginski who would like to comment.
Very good.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners, City Council members. I had sent this letter to the members of the City Council, and I'd like to reiterate it with the Planning Commission here together, just because you're having a joint meeting. With most of the projected industrial and warehouse development in Napa County planned for the confines of the City of American Canyon, I am asking the city to consider introducing a model ordinance to ensure that the plants included in landscape design plans include those that are adaptable to the climate, geology, and topographical conditions of the project. The use of native planting to conserve biodiversity would be required on all non-functional landscaping. We can agree that landscapes are essential to the quality of life, and they provide areas for active and passive recreation as an enhancement to the environment by cleaning the air and the water, mitigating heat islands, providing climate adaptation, preventing erosion, offering fire protection, and replacing the ecosystems lost to development. We can also agree that landscapes using local native plants offer the greatest biological benefit to regional biodiversity, providing habitat and food to wildlife that has evolved to depend on specialized relationships with the local native plants. With the loss of wildlife habitat in the City of American Canyon, it is unavoidable at this time. We can compensate for some of this loss by requiring new industrial warehouse developments to install California native plants. This means a plant indigenous to California that has evolved and occurs naturally in California and has not been hybridized with plants not native to California. These plants would be of low water use and would also provide pollinator benefits. Non-functional turf means any turf that is not functional, including turf located with streets, right-of-way, and parking lots. My conversations with both SDG and Buzz Oats developers were very positive in their willingness to cooperate by switching out their landscaping plans if they were given a clear direction by the city staff on what types of plants to use. I sent them lists that were recommended by our local Native Plant Society. I also received a call from Buzz Oats telling me that they will be incorporating those native plants in their landscaping plans, which I consider a small win. I believe that putting forth an ordinance and developing a comprehensive list of native trees and plants and other aspects of landscaping could be a start towards a conservation effort and will ameliorate some of the destruction these developments are doing to the ecology and wildlife of the bioregion. Thank you for this consideration, and perhaps we can put this on the agenda for further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another speaker?
Good evening, Beth Marcus, resident. Sort of tagging on back to City Council meeting, we were talking about the American Canyon sign when you come into the city. I know I brought this up years ago, but what I would love to see here is a reader sign coming into the city so that people know what's going on in our city. We don't have such a thing. Sort of like what they have on Highway 80. Of course, not that big, but that would be nice. But something that says, like, okay, this week, Meet Me in Streets coming, or we have Holiday Plaza, or whatever it is, whatever our events are, crab feeds, whatever. So I would hope that someday we could get one of those there, or two.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I have no hands raised online.
Okay. So we have no future speakers, and we'll close public comment and move on with our agenda. We have a workshop this evening, Objective Design Standards. Looking forward to the presentation.
Right. All right, thank you, Mayor, council members, Planning Commission, Chair Cruz, and members of the public. I'm Brent Cooper, Community Development Director, and pleased to introduce a workshop on design standards. In American Canyon, we have a variety of design standards for different areas of the city. Usually they're developed in conjunction with specific plans, consistent with our general plan policies, and also we have policies in our zoning ordinance. We'll talk a little bit more about that. One of the advantages of design guidelines in a specific plan is often there is a master developer who retains design review authority through their property sales. And so there's some overall control for the architecture for those projects. Here in the Broadway district, which was a city specific plan, there is no master developer per se. There's individual properties. When we were working on the design guidelines for it, we did a lot of outreach, also with the design community, with architects, and they called for flexibility to allow for creativity. I think experience has shown us, though, that there are a lot of other influences in individual buildings where you have other priorities, perhaps, than what the city's design guidelines might say. So we're kind of struggling with working with applicants who have maybe a corporate influence, economic constraints, personal taste, and then where there's flexibility that could be used to interpret it in a variety of ways. So I think experience has shown us that we've had uneven results. Maybe that some people might like what's been built recently, some might not. We've certainly heard on both sides of it. And so we're really looking forward to having some further guidance and from an organization that really understands the whole nature of design. And so we reached out to RM Design, and they're a firm that does a full range of planning and design. They have won awards throughout California for design guidelines. So we're really excited. Kimmy Nguyen is from RM, and she's going to lead us in a workshop to talk about this subject. Kimmy is a planner with RRM. She focuses on design and specifically with implementation, which is very important to achieve what goals the city has for design. Kimmy has a passion for streamlining processes and regulations to be more logical, consistent, and impactful. So that's really kind of speaking our language and the way we like to do things here in American Canyon. Kimmy has a background in architecture, although she has a master's degree in urban and regional planning. But she has a keen sense of site building design and user experience, and has worked on numerous projects throughout California. Prior to joining RRM, Kimmy's worked for public agencies in San Luis Obispo, Sonoma County, and Los Angeles. So I think she's kind of seen the range there of different environments and regulatories throughout California. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kimmy, and we're really looking forward to your feedback on where we might go from here.
Thank you. Welcome. Good to have you here this evening.
Thank you. You read the whole bio. Thank you. I wasn't sure how that was going to go, but thank you, City Council members and commissioners, for having me here this evening. I am from RM Design Group, and if you aren't familiar with us, we've done a little bit of work in the city. I haven't personally gotten to work here yet. I'm still learning the ins and outs of your kind of development patterns and your recent projects. But my company, we're kind of comprised of architects, engineers, planners, and we pride ourselves on being able to work on both sides of the counter. So we live in reality, we regulate, but everything we do is kind of driven by what can be built today, where the trends are going in construction and labor. And we kind of feel like that's our superpower. So I think it sounds like this is going to be, one entry in what's an ongoing conversation. It sounds like you guys have been well primed to talk about what are the tools in your kit here at the city for design review. And we're going to speak specifically about objective design standards, which is just one tool that we're seeing many jurisdictions move towards in the last 5 years. And then really the rest of this is to hear from you. Like I said, I'm a visitor here. I'm not an expert on your city, and I'm not here to tell you what your design values should be. I think that should be driven by you and your constituents. So just trying to hear your feedback today on how we can improve the design outcomes for residential architecture, commercial architecture, and go from there. So I have a quick presentation to go through. I would probably ask, there's going to be a healthy amount of time for discussion at the end. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer at the end. So regulating design is a big topic, a complex one. I'm going to try to break it down a little bit and catch everyone up so we're starting on the same page. So we have, in most cities, and American Canyon is like most cities in California, where you have general plan policies which convey, your broad values for neighborhood character and corridors. You have zoning code, which I work with zoning codes a lot, and I like to say it's kind of where the rubber meets the road. You get basic provisions for things like building heights, setbacks, landscaping, parking. And then you have design guidelines, which, like Brent mentioned, are usually more specific to specific areas of your city. And those are there to encourage good design, kind of shape the character and the aesthetics of a specific region. And I think just wanted to note that these all kind of work together, but hopefully in tandem, and there are some areas where they overlap. We're generally moving from more general types of policies and broad vision and goals to more nitty-gritty, like let's get into the details a little bit. So I think if I could just prime your attention, we're gonna try to get into specifics as much as we can today, and go from there. So what does it mean to add objective design standards into our toolbox? First of all, objective design standards, I know it's kind of a mouthful. It might not mean a lot to some of you, but I think it's important to just acknowledge where we're starting off, that architecture and design are very subjective. Beauty is very much in the eye of the beholder, I think. What speaks to one person as lovely and eye-catching and a good fit for your city might not speak to the next person in the same way. So personally, I love a California ranch house. I grew up in one, but for some people, ranch era homes were just way too popular in the time they were built, and now they're everywhere and they might look dated to some people. So I just offer that as a caveat to all of this. It can be quite difficult to land on a consensus for what good design is, much less between 9 or 10 of you. Quite a challenge. I think design is really quite personal in the end. So all this verbiage that's up on the screen right now is the state definition of objectivity. So many cities struggle with design review project timelines stretching for years and years, regulations being seen as too squishy or too arbitrary. So the state, especially in regards to housing, this is driven by residential development mostly, the state is trying to shape local processes to be more and more objective wherever they can. This is basically a lot of words to say that wherever you can, you need to have regulations that are clear and measurable, and they are not ambiguous if you can help it. So when applying objective standards, multiple members of the public, decision makers, city staff should all be able to arrive at the same conclusion. You shouldn't be able to go to the planning department, talk to 3 different planners, and arrive at 3 different solutions for what the design of your project might be. And I will say this term of objective design standards is a new one in the last few years, but the idea behind it really isn't. It's something that I think a lot of cities have been striving for a long time. It's just been formalized by this kind of mandate from the state. So what makes a design standard objective? In design regulations and everything you're building as a local government, you're generally, if you're doing good business, you're trying to get away from a lack of clarity and ambiguity. Regulations that are arbitrary or which no one can agree on what they really mean, they can open up the city to really long and unpleasant review processes, in some case legal challenges, like there have been cities that have been challenged by the state due to their inability to shape their residential design review. And I've been hammering on about this for a while, so mostly objective standards are there to give local agencies more control over design outcomes and the design review process. They give the city teeth to enforce what they want to see in new construction and redevelopment. And when it comes to affordable residential development specifically, cities are barred from reviewing new proposals against any provisions that are not seen as streamlined and objective. So basically, the objective standards that you have in place are all that can apply to affordable projects specifically in that specific situation. I know we're talking about more than just affordable housing right now, but many cities are they're anticipating what the state is going to be doing in this arena, and they're trying to go above and beyond what the state requires in regards to improving their review processes. So while the state is only mandating objective standards for affordable housing, many cities kind of see the writing on the wall a little bit, and they're saying, you know, we better get out ahead of this. We better take control of other types of development review as well while we have the chance. In the end, when we write regulations, we want to remove uncertainty and risk from the development process as much as possible. This ends up giving your decision makers more to work with, your staff members more to work with, and then also in many cases, it's much more business friendly for the average applicant. If they can see a checklist of all the things that are going to be expected of them, they can properly assess the amount of risk and capital that they need to move forward in a project. If they see a bunch of fluffy language that talks about, you know, certain things are encouraged and valued and preferred, those gray areas create a lot of uncertainty and risk for applicants. So I think with that, apologies if I'm speaking a little fast. I wanted to break this down, these concepts down a little bit with some examples. The first one we'll dive into addresses color. So we think of what we do at RM as translating subjectivity and regulations. So an example of some subjective language up here: building facades should be painted in muted earth tones. And so I think that sounds pretty good until, no one can quite agree on what an earth tone is or what a muted color is. I think I was in a meeting with you, Brent, last week, and Brent said there's a lot of colors on this big earth that we're on. So one way that the city can regulate color, just this example, is by adopting a set of allowable color palettes. A lot of applicants respond really well to having a menu of what you want to see. And then many applicants also respond really well to seeing those options, which the city's like, maybe not right for our community. The next example, kind of similarly, we can talk about building materials, and I think materials are so closely related to, architectural style and heritage and kind of the climate you find yourselves in, and now just the availability of building materials. But let's say in this example of language, all facades should use multiple high-quality materials. Again, I think it sounds pretty great. Who doesn't want high-quality materials that are going to last and look good over time? So while it seems pretty simple, it's actually pretty broad and squishy. Your planners might be caught in situations they don't want to be caught in. They might be arguing with the builder, is stucco a high-quality material or not? And that might go on for a little while longer than anyone wants. So what can we do to make this a little more clear for the applicant and for your staff? We can try to say, again, providing options. Facades shall provide one roof material from the following. Here's a few examples that might fit in the context of your community. You could also say, for when it comes to exterior siding and wall materials, you can say, hey, provide at least a couple options from these palettes. And again, a couple that might work for your community, an option that might not work so well for your community. Last example here has to do with windows. I think I'm not an architect, but I know when it comes to privacy and light and air, these are maybe some of the most important things when it comes to designing a site, especially a residential site where people are going to live. Designers are all about maximizing light and air and livability in new spaces while preserving a sense of privacy. But preserving that sense of privacy often takes a lot of creative site planning to, get windows to not match up with your neighbors, and provide the appropriate amount of light in the unit. So the suggestion that I would probably offer for a piece of language like this is to provide clear parameters. Say, hey, in this use case, when you're really quite close to, say, a property line or a neighboring building, you're going to be expected to do one of these things. And kind of leaving it up to the applicant to decide what's going to work the best for them. I think there's a little bit of flexibility, but the flexibility still allows the city to achieve some of its goals in the end, hopefully. So I think that's the part where I start talking a little bit less, and then I kind of hand it over to you guys and try to see what are the priorities you would like to see staff pursuing when they take the next crack at these regulations, whether it's Broadway or another effort. we have just a couple questions. Sorry about that. I mixed up the order. But basically, how well are your existing tools working? Just a couple of recent examples that city staff provided for me. Really interesting spread, right? So just some questions to kind of get your wheels turning a little bit. And we've touched on a couple of topics here, just a couple of examples, but we're not limited to just speaking on those examples. So would love to hear from you guys on this topic and kind of the ideas you'd like to prioritize with staff. Should I stay up here? Okay. Thank you.
Are you looking for feedback at this time?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead. Who's on number 4 here?
That's me.
Okay. Vice Mayor Oro.
You'd like to stay? Okay.
You guys ready?
We're ready.
Okay. All right. So we've have designs, and if you go back to the slide with all the recent examples, the one with the chicken guy, there you go.
Could you believe those come from the same set of design guidelines mostly?
Yeah. So here's the deal. I don't know if it's the new look or if it's just it looks incomplete or if we're in this awkward stage of inserting things. But, Home to Suites and Napa Cove just aren't appealing to me. And, I mean, Home to Suites I could probably learn to live with. Napa Cove was really prominent on the highway. And I texted Jason earlier prior to this meeting. I'm like, dude, we got to get this right. It's just not feeling right. And I'm hearing that across the community. And I'm glad we're having this meeting to try to understand it. And so Jason happened to be at the site that day, particularly I'm speaking of Napa Cove. And I'm like, I actually texted him pictures. I spent 4 years living in China. And it reminded me of block living in China, like communist housing in China that they have for the people. And I thought it was the colors. And it probably was a little bit of the colors. The colors are, these are subjective again, right? They're a little bit muted. They're not strong. But then he said something that pointed it out. I mean, like I could see where they could do the design modern industrial. When I think modern industrial, which is one of our things, it doesn't hit home. And then I realized it was the flat roof. And I think the flat roof has a lot to do with it. We're not going to change that. Like if they change the colors to that, I said, hey, if it was just black and white, it'd be better. And Jason said to me, you've been watching too much Home and Garden television. And I'm not, because I haven't watched that in like 5 months, but no, like a year or something. It seriously hasn't been a while. But talk to me, like, how do municipalities deal with when it just doesn't feel right? And we have other projects coming in, and I just can't feel good about it. I can feel good about investment coming into the city. I can feel good about power lines coming down. I can feel good about that curb, the first curb on Highway 29, finished curb being there. I can do that. But when the product shows up and it's just, this is our highway. This is the front door. It should pop. And it should be like, whoa, I'm driving through town. And over time, I would think that as you go through here, everything is unique, distinct, and attractive, but kind of feels the same way. And it looks a lot better on this screen than it does in reality. And I'm concerned.
Well, I'll come at the...
I was hoping for feedback from the designer.
Well, if not, I can comment.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding your question...
Could you use the microphone, please?
Sorry?
I don't know if it was a general, the question
Sorry,
really,
sorry, the mic?
yeah.
Yes, thank you.
The general question is, how do we get this right? What do we do when it's not feeling right? And I guess really, do we have to revisit these standards and these color palettes and these things to really understand where we're going with this process?
Well, I think Vice Mayor Oro, you're hitting on the beginnings of exploring what is in this town as a consensus good design, and you've hit on certainly one for sure, a tangible, easily defined issue. In American Canyon, residential projects may need to have a pitched roof, just to read residential, because in our town, that's just how we like it to look. Obviously, there are flat roofs and residential all over the place, but here, which is what we wanted to have an American Canyon design. To come to American Canyon, we don't want to look like any town, right? We want to look like our town. So if one of the things, and there's a consensus, is that residential needs to have a pitched roof, then that gets crafted into the design standards. Obviously, we can't change a built project like Napa Cove, but there will always be another one. So that would be another one. Another comment you made about home to suites and being uncomfortable about that. A lot of our commercial projects, particularly on Highway 29, may have a flat roof, but there's a pitched roof component, whether it's a porte cochere or whether it's a tower feature or something. So you may be hitting on something here that we could explore with the community. I just have a guess that maybe our studio audience here might have an opinion. Perhaps they might support some of those ideas. And those are things that would get incorporated into something that is objective. And I think and Kimmy hit on this in her presentation, when something is objective, then we know we're going to be able to happen. It's in there, it's clear, and that's just a standard. In the same way we have height limits and setbacks, we have an architecture standard that's clear. And if a project doesn't provide it, well, then it doesn't make it through the process.
Yeah, but that's the trick, though. That's the trick. The objective that we want, this body wants, these two bodies want, it's getting that right. And so I'm trying, maybe giving me an example of a city that successfully implemented something that they've done. And Kimmy, if you know that, what that may be, I mean, like the thing that comes to mind, and it's hyper restrictive, is Carmel, right? There's really strict design standards there. There's probably other master plan communities that are there, and obviously we're neither that. I guess really it is I want to be objective. Mm-hmm. I want to meet those state mandates. I also want it to look a certain way. Mm-hmm. How do we get there? Because, we haven't heard from anybody else on this panel, but I'm going to suspect about the recent design projects on Napa Cove and Home to Suites. I'm going to guess we got a big majority of agreeing with me. And if that's true, then we need to fix something pretty quickly before any other project comes up.
I think in the same way beauty's in the eye of the beholder, so is success in design standards. I remember many years ago, like 20 years ago, getting a copy of the City of Beverly Hills design standards for residential. And their design standards was you can build whatever you want, but if it's a Georgian style, it better be an authentic Georgian style. If it's streamlined modern, it better be an authentic. I mean, they had design guidelines. I mean, these are authentic, documented architectural design standards. And so if you're going to build a Tudor, go ahead, but it better be a real one and not have the wrong window size and it was very prescriptive that way. And I really like that. It's like, if you're going to do something, do it authentic. And so that was an example of objective design standards from 1995. And so, I think property values in Beverly Hills have been sustained since then. So obviously it works. But other communities have different priorities in terms of what they're looking for. They're more urban, and they just have a different context. So a lot of it is, what is it that we within our community feels right? And to the extent that we can define that, then that can get incorporated into objective standards. And maybe we start with some key features and adjust as we go and get more experience. If there's a big picture, certainly a roof pitch would be an easy and clearly visible change to what can happen today, for example.
Comment from Buzz Butler, who developed the over here at the Lodge, old Walmart.
Mhm.
You could usually have a Walmart. If I have family in Fort Worth, Texas. Walmart, there's a big white box. He didn't want that. He made it look like there's different elements in front that make it look like a bunch of stores together there. You want to have a flat roof on the Lodge? No. He says, I'm taking my inspiration from the mountain behind it, and the color palette comes from that as well. So it's kind of moves. He's had conversations, I know, with the developer for a village at Vintage Ranch. And that project, in my view, turned out very well, as well as Canyon over here across next to Walmart. So I think there's elements out there that you incorporate, but it's like making it something that's utilized throughout the city. One of the first places that opened that I was aware of when I came here in the early 2000s was Canyon Plaza. It's more of a utility farm type building, pitch roof, but I think they're metal, wood siding. It looks like a farm shed type of construction type of thing, which has its appeal as well. I think probably something a roof line on it, but I think looking at it, look what we've built that works. It might be a way of approaching this thing. Thank you. Have a comment here, Councilmember Joseph.
Yes, well, this is a good discussion, and I appreciate it because fundamentally I don't know if there isn't a right or wrong answer, and part of my problem is that I understand you don't want subjective standards for all the reasons you outlined, but I keep getting reminded of AB 1234. Every 2 years, every elected person has to go through a 2-hour ethics course. And generally, it just goes through and says, here's what the laws say, you can't do this and you can't do that. And that's considered ethics training. The reality is you can't legislate integrity or ethics, and you probably can't legislate a good-looking architecture. And states and others that try to do that, I think is just an attempt to bureaucratize something so that they don't get sued as easily. So with that bias out there on the table, where I'm coming from is that it's great to identify some of those objective standards. I certainly appreciate the idea of saying, instead of muted earth tones, here's the palette of X number of colors. And doing that for as many objective things, as many materials as you can, all of that makes sense. But when after you've done all that, you can still mix and match and turn into an ugly thing. And so for me, it's like, let's start with those objective standards, but how you assemble it can still make something look beautiful or not so hot. So then in my head, it's like, okay, there's got to be some other element in the process that ensures the end result is good-looking architecture. And the answer is probably, a good architect. And so I don't want to steal the city manager's thunder, but he came up with an idea, and it's a good one. And so
I have to give credit to our community development director. It was his good idea, not mine.
Or it was
Actually, I think it was the city manager. I know that we were talking about we were discussing our approach to the workshop Truth be known, I was a little stressed about it. How are we going to be able to move forward, gain consensus? And then Jason looked at me and he said, Brent, you need professional help.
And we got it.
Yeah.
And he's right.
We're glad he brought that up.
And so that's why we've brought in RRM. But I think if we were to take the next step, quite to your point, Councilmember Joseph, we have standards, but the way in which it's assembled.
Exactly.
Because as we all know, half of the architects graduated on the bottom half of their class. So we can have, perhaps through our process, our own architects that we send it to provide an educated review of applications. And that way, we're gaining a skill set that we don't have today.
I couldn't have said that better myself.
Preferably one that graduated maybe in the upper 50%.
That would be part of the RFP.
Oh, okay.
Ready for the next slide?
Well, okay, so I do think that's a good idea, and then obviously I think we need to go back to our Broadway district-specific plan and go through and objectify it as much as we can. But we also need to start thinking about having some kind of an architect firm as part of, just as you run the building code, process through a building inspection, we would have some kind of architectural inspection. And, because I agree with Vice Mayor Oro, we're starting to see some projects that just don't look as good as we'd like. And I think we've had a few projects that are nice. I think Canyon Plaza is a good-looking project. I think even Safeway, has a nice element to it. And certainly the Valley View apartments, to consider that that's an all-affordable project, it looks better than most market rate projects. And so maybe the idea is, what is it about those projects that are impressive? I was trying to explain to the manager, I'm not an architect, so I don't know. I can just say that one's good looking, that one's ugly. I can't tell you why, other than to say I'm screwed up, but, that goes without saying. So it's kind of like, Napa Cove, there's something kind of drab and institutional looking. I don't know why that is, but that's what it looks like. Even Home to Suite, it's got some, maybe it's just, it has to have some contrasting colors or something, or some type of architectural treatment. So it's kind of like, I don't want to do the, definition of obscenity, but it really is kind of like, it's hard to say what it's going to look like until it shows up, and then it's too late. Yeah. So how do we protect ourselves? And then the last point is, looking to our planning commission, it's going to be up to you guys to be the gatekeeper and to know that, at least at this point in time, you've got a council that's, supporting you and will have your back if you say that's not good looking enough, go back and try it again. So that's my comment.
The Valley View, when those were being built, I'm sure the commissioners heard plenty of them on that. Oh, we don't want those houses. We don't want that in our neighborhood. What happened after you got it built? People were saying, how do I get one of those? How do I get one of those? That was a very successful project. And what is it about it? Well, there's pitched roofs. Yep. They're on a hillside, so they're very visible. The color on it, the siding on it, lends itself to, it's not all stucco type of stuff. But yeah, it's just, so an example, what I feel was a very successful project that met with resistance, but then folks said, wow. Yeah. Who's number 6 down there? Oh, okay, Eric.
Mayor, if I may, just real quick,
Sure.
Mark's comments were correct. One of jumping to solutions already. One of the ideas that we've come up with is to involve some expertise, both in what I characterize as polishing BDSP through an architectural lens, and then helping us implement both at the entitlement and the building permit stage. But as we get the middle part of page 4 in the packet asks a couple of provocative questions at the end. And it's one of the things that, as we look to try and do some of this polishing, what we want to hear from the commission and from the council is quite literally, what are those things about projects you do like? What are those things you're not fond of? And we'd like to hear the individual opinions of you all, because we can kind of tabulate those. We've talked about pitched elements. Okay, we've got that. Color palette seems reasonable, and we're sort of at this point saying we've got a relatively already defined color palette along the highway. My sense is we're not probably wanting to deviate from that. We're not talking camouflage and bright orange along the highway, right? We're probably trying to blend in with the hills and what's already there. So coming up with a color palette that matches and it's more defined. So you get those two kind of solutions. But what are some of the things about these products that have come forward? Institutional looking isn't very specific. What is it about it? Is it the rough edges? Is it the color? Those, getting to some real details, and we definitely want to hear from everybody. So thank you, Mayor.
Sure. Number 6, Eric?
Thank you. I guess I want to take one of the things that Kimmy said earlier and kind of take a little step back, which is, what are we looking for from a very broad sense? I know that when I moved here, the perception, which was in 2004, so it's 20 years ago, the perception I had of the community, the way I would describe American Canyon, was a rural suburban community.
Mm-hmm.
And that carries a certain connotation with it in terms of what the looks you're expecting to see are going to be. I think as we have grown in these past 20 years, we have kind of, to a certain extent, really downplayed the rural side and become more of a suburban community.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to a bit of a change, at least in my mind, in terms of what the expectations of the look of the community are going to be. And I got a couple more things I want to touch on, but when I'm done, I would love to get some feedback in terms of kind of where my head is at and what I'm seeing and any observations. And Kimmy, I don't know how long you've been in this general vicinity, having been in LA and San Luis Obispo and Sonoma and whatnot. But I think taking that step back and understanding kind of what's the sort of global picture we're looking for. So the next thing I want to mention is, and I'll help the city manager, Mr. Holly, out here, is, my beef with the home to suites really is the color palette. And it was one where there was supposed to be a different color palette, if I am recalling correctly, that I think would have been much more conducive to the building than what was ultimately permitted and is out there at this point in time. So I think the color palettes can be very influential. And then in terms of Napa Cove, I don't know if it's the roof that may play into it. To me, when I look at it, what I've heard people comment to me is it sort of looks prison-like. And I think it really comes down to that there's not enough windows. I think if you lightened it up and there were more windows on that property, it would change the look of it substantially. I think the color palette on that could also probably be improved, but to me, I think the biggest issue with that project, given the size of the project, the lack of windows, I believe, makes it look more massive than if there were more windows, there were more light throughout the whole vicinity. I think it would have had a significant impact on the perception of the project. The last thing I want to touch on is sort of the one pending project that we've got, which is what we talked about at our last Planning Commission meeting, the Oat Hill project, where there is a number of changes. And, I'll go back to kind of what I said during that meeting, which is on an individual piece, most of the changes that are being proposed are perfectly fine. But when you aggregate it all together, you are taking the original look of the property, which sort of was I'll call it more stately look, and downgrading it substantially. And I have an issue with that because of what Oat Hill represents to this, or at least what I believe Oat Hill represents to this community, and what that property and development on that property should be, which in my opinion, it should be, and I have no issue with it being apartments, whether they eventually turn to condos or whatever. That's not it. It doesn't have to be single-family homes. But that's a prime piece of real estate in this community. What's built there should be first class, look really sharp, be notable, and be noteworthy from anybody driving along 29, because they're going to see it. I want people, whether they're coming from St. Helena or Calistoga, Napa, coming up north, to do wine tasting, so from Walnut Creek or San Francisco or wherever, to stop and take a look at that and go, wow, that's a cool project. Where are we? Oh, that's American Canyon? Maybe we better check that place out. I think the way it's looking now, that's not the reaction that we're going to get. So that's my comments, and any feedback, as I said, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I did want to talk a little bit. I'm going to try to poke out what I think, maybe just try to put to words some of the things I'm seeing about Napa Cove and then Home to Suites. When I look at Napa Cove, I think it's the blankness of the facade that strikes me. There's very little that relates to how am I as a human residing here or visiting the site gonna interact with this facade. You called out the windows. I think quality windows with shutters or awnings or planter boxes or things like that seem small, but sometimes for certain projects they can make the difference. So there's that. I also think maybe a pitched roof could have helped. I don't know if that's where my mind goes necessarily, but I also tend to think of when I see a large building like that, of that scale, at least a few stories, I think about building hierarchy. So just thinking about, when I'm looking at these plans, does it strike me that this building facade has a base, a middle, and a top that seem to read well? Do those elements work together? And again, I know I'm kind of speaking subjectively and asking you to imagine a little bit. But I think if the Broadway specific plan goes forward, some of those elements of hierarchy to hone in on could be helpful for certain applicants. Yeah, that's maybe where I'd start with that one. And then I think speaking to more of the general comments that we had about, the bureaucratizing of this process, I think like a lot of growing communities, American Canyon, you have the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I think we can try to circle around the values that you hold, and then I think maybe even as Commissioner Altman brought up, the general vision or vibe or whatever you'd like to call it, that your regulations should eventually point to. But I would caution against over-prescribing. I think when you over-prescribe, you can end up with just projects that are really expensive, and they lock out a certain type of applicant that you usually want to see in your community. Yeah, so just general comment there. But yeah, it is hard to hold everyone to the same set of standards when you're really just trying to guard against, like, put in some guardrails for like really the worst offenders or like the worst actors in your system. I don't know if any of those comments are productive, but yeah.
Well, we got some more lights on here as well. Some people wanting to comment. Who hasn't had a chance to? I think.
Hello.
Number 5.
Chair Cruz, the Planning Commission. Oh.
No, I'm looking here at who has mic number 5, please. I think she was up first. And then-
Commissioner Malari.
Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Kimmy. Appreciate it. You did well. My head goes bigger with this, right? We started off with what's in our general plan. Then we identified that we needed to, work with what our zoning code and also our design guidelines. So starting big, what was the process? Well, one, I think a few things is, when was the last time that we actually did this type of exercise and we wanted to review our design standards? How long ago was that? Also, what is the process for any changes or recommendations to change the design process? Because right now, we're all leaders here in our own city. I definitely agree with bringing in a consultant and architects to help redefine what our design guidelines are. But also, I think you hit it home in the beginning, is that we are the ones that create the community. We create the city here. So it's great, we can get all the warm and fuzzies and we can get the idea of like what is on a grander scale, and like what we're thinking for guidelines and regulations, and we can point in that direction. But I'd like to see just understanding the process for that. And this is an opportunity for us to not go back to our developers and saying, hey, here's the things of the concern, because these projects are already approved.
Yeah.
They're already in full flight, but here we are criticizing the things that we're seeing that are getting built. I think one thing that we can definitely improve on is, we see the renderings, on the screen versus kind of just in, poster size, but maybe having some 3D models, right, out that we could really see what those color palettes look like, what those renderings are going to actually be looking like. But also just truly understanding, like, we have an opportunity here not to just educate us, but also educate our planners, right? It's pointing out to when the application gets submitted, right? They work through the general plan, they understand that in and out, begin to cascade that information down on like, hey, here are some recommendations, here's some pointers, but also saying, hey, this is not what's aligned with what we see are in our guidelines or in our design standards. And we would take that, speaking for all of our, the planning commission, but we would take that feedback and just understanding like, oh, right. So then the emotion goes into our decision, right? We're saying, hey, that makes sense, or I disagree, but then it's all arbitrary after that. So it's just my thought.
Okay.
But I would like to know, one, what is the current design process for review? And also, how do I get on that so we can move this forward and begin to start making some changes?
Well, Commissioner Miller, I think it's great you may raise this, because a lot of what happens, obviously, is through a process. So we have the standards today. In the Broadway specifically, we do require that the architect write up an explanation of how it complies with the standards, but then their architects were not. I do know that one example I would call a success that isn't built yet would be the Hampton Inn Hotel. When it was proposed, it was very angular, blocky, gray. My description of the architectural style was a fine example of brutalist modern. But the design guidelines in the Broadway district, while not specifying the specific style, says, look at what's next to it and emulate that. And what's next to it is Canyon Plaza with an agrarian style, and this is as far away from that as you could get. And the applicant refused to change the style. No, this is what we're doing. Fortunately, the hotel needed a zone change. So we scheduled a workshop with the council and asked the council, what do you think about this example? It isn't what staff's recommending. Here are our comments. Here's what we advised. And the council supported that. And the applicant went back and made a big change. They added a pitched roof. The color palette was different. The scale of the hotel is quite different. It's 3 stories. The shopping center next to it is 1 story. Just the scale alone adds contrast. But the building is set back further from the highway, so from a perspective, from the viewer, it does tend to help mitigate that. But they had the lower level porte cochere in the front, which was pitched. So we had a photo simulation, I think what you were talking about, to depict here is the building next door and here is the one that is the hotel, and it was a marked improvement. So kind of excited to see how that hotel turns out in reality. But we are also, when the construction plans came in, we're comparing it to what was approved by the Planning Commission. And I have yet to see a project that doesn't sneak in some changes of one kind or another. And sure enough, we pointed out a variety of things in the hotel that was different than what the Planning Commission, and those were the comments we made. We don't always catch them all, but if we don't catch them all and it's correctable, the fact that they snuck something in and didn't call it out doesn't give them a free pass. So it makes for some awkward conversations later, because it is hard to change something that's built. But it is something that we do very carefully to try to make sure that you get what was approved. I just had a conversation today with the Napa Cove builder, and they're concerned about cost overruns, and they're looking at it very much from their perspective. Well, that was a number of things that happened that we didn't contemplate that cost us a lot of money, and so maybe there's some changes in here and there, but look at all the things that we had to face. So they do have a perspective. I'm not saying it, and it's a valid perspective. They do look at things very differently, I guess I will conclude, than how we might look at it. So we work hard with applicants to try to give them a fair shake and kind of move things forward. So ultimately the project does go to the Planning Commission for review. We do the best we can to have outreach early in the process to let property owners know. We've expanded the radius, thank you, Beth, to increase the number of people that do get to see it early with written paper. Those that have foresight and sign up to our email can be anywhere in the city, and we will send them the notices when it comes in. They'll notice when it's hearing. Nicole also sends out reminders. And so we have websites with the information, with pictures. We allow people to provide comments. We do reach out, but I know that everybody living their lives are busy. They don't necessarily commit themselves to, checking all of these things. So I can understand. I think everybody does the best they can. What I really like about the notion of objective design standards is for those things that are very important to us, they are well defined, and also I would say in the American Canyon way, it isn't necessarily our way or the highway. We don't tend to behave that way. I would imagine, thinking ahead, I'm thinking way ahead here, should we do move forward with something that is like objective design standards, there would be a provision in there, because we can't be so, I don't know, arrogant's the right word, to think that we can know everything and define it ahead of time. That we all have a bit of humility in that if somebody has another idea that maybe doesn't quite fit this, that we have a process to air that to you and the decision makers. Is this wasn't contemplated, this is what they want to bring forward. You decide. You can say no, but maybe there'll be some new innovation, styles change, tastes change, people change. So having something in a plan that does allow for there to be an opportunity to air a different idea, and maybe a better idea, and then that changes the standards, who knows? But better defining what it is that is very important to us, and having a firm that is a profession in architecture who knows our standards and what we're looking for, be able to provide that professional feedback. Because I can understand if an architect is hearing from a pointed head planner, that's criticizing their work, that they're not going to want to listen to it. But they probably would listen to another architect. So I can understand the issue of positional authority as well, because we do ultimately work in a human-based field.
Very good. Next speaker. I think, did you get a chance to comment earlier?
I did, so
But-
somebody else wanted to.
Yeah, I think Councilmember Washington hadn't had a chance to comment.
Oh, no, I'll pass for the
You'll
next
pass
person.
on it?
I think
All
it's
right.
random.
No, then I will go to, I think, yes.
Thank you for your time. Oops.
You got a number next to your light there? So
I had, but I turned it off.
Oh, you
earlier.
okay, all right, okay.
Turn
good.
off. So most of from the commission and from the council pretty much answered my question for that eloquent answer you gave us, Brent. I was looking at the plans, the Broadway District Plan from 10 years ago. It seemed like we had something similar to this already, where they talked about farmhouses and objective designs and things of that nature. Then it seemed to defray from that. We have some pitch, some flat, some things like that. My question earlier, but I believe you guys answered it, was how do we codify this and make that the standard? But it seems like we don't want to regulate that, as obviously we don't want to applicants to be afraid not to come in to bring in certain designs. But again, how do we codify that? How do we get people to say, okay, this is the standard that American Canyon wants, and this is what we're going to go by? I just want to get your expertise on that.
Let Kimmy answer, and then I'll give you an answer too.
Sure. So when I've worked on these for a number of cities, and many cities decide to adopt these as part of like a chapter in their zoning code. That's a common tactic. Zoning code's not the most graphic, not the most beautiful documents, I will have to say. That's starting to change a little bit. Like most design practitioners and contractors are referencing zoning codes online, like on their phone when they're out in the fields. And so that is something we're seeing. But many, when it comes to, that approach, adopting it as a chapter in the code, there are probably already other sections of the code that contain objective provisions. Some, like an example is, how do you design a parking lot, or what does the landscaping look on a certain site? So those cross references become important. Other cities decide to not adopt it as a code except by reference, and they kind of have it as a standalone document that allows it to be like really beautiful and visual and kind of aspirational a little bit even. So I think either way, it ends up being something you need to adopt as a legislative tool. Otherwise, you can't really point to it as we've adopted these. But I don't know if that helps. Yeah.
And I think also, Chair Cruz, what you're referring to as well, perhaps, is we all recognize that whatever might become a component to objective design standards would be the product of outreach, workshops, ideas, sketches, and what practitioners do, myself and RM or other firms like that, is they take that feedback and are able to articulate it into rules. That's probably the easy part. The hard part is knowing what it is you're looking for. And then the rest of us can take it from there and turn it into something that is the regulatory equivalent.
I also wanted to add that something that me and my colleagues do, and I've seen other firms and agencies do this as well, is as part of that sort of outreach process, when you go out to the community and say, hey, what do we want to look like in 10, 20 years? As part of that process, when you have something, as Brent said, you know, it's either a codified document or something like that, that you then apply that to a hypothetical project or a number of hypothetical projects to kind of truth test them a little bit and be like, actually, what are you, like, these color palettes look good on the page, but what does it look like when you apply it to so-and-so style on this corner, maybe. So I think the kind of sketching those out to test fit a little bit is really helpful, and then it just makes it more tangible for members of your community, because this is all kind of like it's complex, yeah. So I don't know if that helps.
Next picture, Councilmember Joseph.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to clarify that I'm not picking on the Planning Commission. And stepping back, it's like we're kind of beating up on Napa Cove and Home to Suite. But on the flip side, I'm going through the materials we got, and if you look at the rendering of Napa Cove apartments, they don't really look that bad, or the rendering of it doesn't look that bad. And some of it is because it had a muted earth tone to the palette. And at least what I think came out in reality is something that's a little more red, and it's that the redness of the paint is what just gives it the off look, that it's almost like they picked up the wrong can of paint and that it went sideways. So I do think there's something to be said by making sure that, you know, getting back to the possible solution, having an architect either, you know, on call to be able to, you know, translate the pretty picture that we get, that we all love, and say, okay, you're not going there, you know, you're sneaking in stuff. So we definitely need to have somebody who can be there to make sure that the picture renderings that we get is what we get. And along that same line, I want to reaffirm the idea that there are, you know, that we have 3D renderings, or, you know, technology is such that, you know, if you can go to Home Depot online and take a picture of your room and map out what everything looks like, you know, we ought to be able to expect the same thing and say, look, show us what it's going to look like as much as we can, because once we make this decision, we can't just say, oh, you know, this doesn't look like what I thought, can you start over? That's not an option. So I don't think there's any harm in putting more of that burden on the developer or the applicant, because I don't think the technology is all that unique anymore. So I do think that's something to consider. I also want to throw out, you know, on behalf of Yvonne, who's left, that part of our objective standards ought to include landscaping, and I would certainly support making sure that we have a native plant palette of sorts, because I do think that that's environmentally, you know, sound, and it should, you know, there ought to be nice, attractive-looking native plants out there that we can use. And so I guess where I'm coming from is that the objective standards can probably give us some baselines that we kind of narrow the field and say, these are the color palettes, these are the various things, but what you as an applicant do with all of that, that's where the good-looking architecture, that's where I think the quality kicks in. And we just need to have an expert available who can either help the applicant, or absent that, can help us in evaluating the quality of the design. And so I think that may be the best way to blend objective standards with, frankly, a very subjective, we want it to look good when it's all over. So that's. Right.
So that way, it's clear when we're working with the architect that they also understand.
Right.
When we're working with the planners and developers that are coming in, that there is no, you know,
Squishy. Right.
understanding of just misunderstanding of what our expectations are.
No, I would agree. I think we do, one of the things we have to consider is investing in looking at our Broadway standards and rewriting them. So I certainly think that's an important step. So, thank you.
Okay. Who's number 5? Okay.
Hi, Vice Chair Mohammed, Planning Commission. My notes are all over the place, but I'm really excited about the planned developments that we have in American Canyon, especially along the 29 corridor. A friend of mine lives in Emeryville, and every time she drives through American Canyon, she always says, "Oh, that place is ugly." But with having this workshop and coming up with objective designs, I think that perception's gonna change dramatically. So I'm hoping for that. We are the gateway of Napa Valley, so we should be more aesthetically appealing, right? And it makes sense that, or a lot of us want to make sure that we preserve the unique character of our community, and you know, that the new design guidelines, whatever we come up with, are especially exciting because they'll ensure that they'll match the aesthetics that we're aiming for, right? And then we want to ensure that our buildings reflect the charm and character of American Canyon, because, you know, we live in a special city. And again, what Yvonne said, integrating the natural features, trees, landscaping, it creates spaces where our residents and visitors can gather, socialize, and enjoy the environment. So that's huge here in American Canyon. We're creating a distinct family-friendly atmosphere in American Canyon, and that sets us apart from our surrounding communities. So I like this idea of creating objective standards, like you gave the example, the color, the menu palettes. That's a great idea. Materials, provide options, and then the windows, yeah, or taking away. It's a great idea. So I'm really looking forward to this, and yes, we need help. So thank you for your presentation.
Okay. Who has number 6? Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I chimed in here. A lot of things that we've talked about, and you know, a big thing that came back to me, you know, design standards are dynamic. They are always going to change. They're going to change year to year, phase to phase, whatever it may be. And there's no way for us to control that. I think the big thing that we need to do is just think about the general theme of what our city is, what we want it to be, and I think that's been mentioned a few times here. You know, when I think about American Canyon, first thing that comes up to me is just community. We've always wanted to be a small town. There's attributes of that we've always wanted. But when I think about small town, and I grew up in a small town, one of the big things that makes it unique is you walk around and it's not all the same. Every house is a little bit different. Usually there's not tract homes, but even, you know, every house is a little bit different. The designs are there, but they all kind of commingle and mesh and make sense. And I think we've done a very good job of that when it comes to the residential communities that have been planned out in the city. I think really the issues around design tend to come up with the one-offs. As an example, the either medium density housing, the high density housing, some of the hotels, the restaurants, things that aren't a large development in the city, and they kind of jump out. And you know, I'm looking at recent projects, this little slide in here with all the different projects, and I think back to a couple of these ones, home suites we've been talking about. There was some design issues around home suites that we talked about during planning commission. A lot of it came down to the company's models and their palettes and what they put forward as, you know, their themes and everything else, how that conflicts with us. The exact same thing with Chicken Gut. I mean, nobody hears mention Chicken Gut. Chicken Gut stands out. When they're done, you're going to know Chicken Gut when you're at the town. I mean,
Yes, you
just
will.
the color aspect of it. And that is something when we talk that, that was something that comes with chicken gun. And we were willing to, because there was a huge outcry. Everybody wanted chicken gun. You know, there were some things about greenhouse gases and all of that around the conversation, but none of it was around, we don't want chicken gun or how chicken gun even looked. Everybody wanted that. So we do make them as exceptions at times. And we have to keep that in mind of, you know, what we want to feel like, yet at the same time, what allows us to continue our economic growth and spur growth in our city. A lot of it is what is in Broadway. I mean, most people's impression of our community, they don't get walks out, they drive through Broadway. That's what they see. And that is where we're seeing some of that. Broadway specific plan was there, there's design standards in it, yet we caved to that a little bit for economic reasons. We caved to it a little bit for the hotel, we caved to it a little bit on the chicken guy. Napa Cove, the design of it, again, I think the rendering of it and what came up, there's significant difference there. I don't know, I haven't dove into what it is, but there's something there. Plus the simple fact that it's, you know, just 10 feet off 29, it's just jumping out at you because it's a brand new building. I really like the comment that Brent made that work with the other hotel. Let's see what your project looks like from a bigger perspective. I want to see renderings of the city in a community, so I can see the difference in design colors, the difference in structure, but how this building sits with the buildings next to it, adjacent. I think that was a great thing to mention. I think that would be a great thing to do. But I think the big thing this is all coming from, at least on planning commission, is what we experienced last week with Oak Hill. So many minor modifications that they want, and when that project changed hands, the new developers really looking at, okay, how can we turn a little money, because it's an expensive project. And it goes down to some of these design aspects that were in the original design, which were a little bit more costly, and now they're trying to cut money in. It's easier to do in some of those design aspects. But those are the areas that we need to really think about. Do we allow this, especially in Broadway? Everybody sees. Other than that, great discussion. I think it needs to continue. I don't know if there's a way of getting a set design standards that are, you know, carved in granite. I think we always have to be open to re-exploring them on a regular basis and hearing what different projects have and their reasoning behind it. But at the same time, we know what we want to be. We know what we've been working on becoming for the last 30 years. I think we stick with that core value of a community, a hometown, connections with nature, ecologically, all of those aspects, let those things drive us. And while the economy of it is very important, that's not what we see. We'll see without it. And we have to make sure that we are making decisions that work best for both. Thank you, that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Oro?
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep my comments brief because I know we've been talking about this for a while, but I do want to hit on the request by the city manager of what we might be looking for. You know, I don't know exactly what it is, but this is just my comments based on this discussion. Pitched roofs are probably helpful. Color palettes need to be revisited and talked about. I think that's going to help. There was some discussion earlier, I think Commissioner Altman talked about it, rural, suburban, who we were. I just want to remind folks, before I got on council, I served on the Broadway District Specific Plan Committee with Beth Marcus was there. Fran was a part of those. This was 2015, 16 when we adopted that plan. This was long-term community input. It wasn't that long ago, although it did go by fast. We settled on modern farmhouse and modern industrial. Chair Cruz brought it up and said, you know, he looked at the plan, and I remember looking at the plan over the weekend. The two examples that have just come up look nothing like the plan, Napa Cove nor the hotel. If you go look back at the BDS guidelines, it's not even close. So that's I guess that's concerning that we actually implemented something and gave guidelines and it wasn't executed properly. But Kimmy, you mentioned something that just kind of struck me, and I think it's going to help us all. And what you said was, and it was a question really, how do you interact with it? And my interaction with Napa Cove is negative. My interaction with Home to Suites is negative because it's blocky, it's boring. There's no place for me to go but into a wall. But you look at Chicken Guy. Chicken Guy, I'll let that go because there's an angle, there's a side, there's a color, there's things that come out at you that you interact with it differently. Valley View Apartments, there's a picture in our packet where they have serpentine sidewalks all up and down. It's just a place to interact and walk through that makes it really nice. And I think that may be a question that we may have to ask ourselves as we think about design. And it's pedestrian, it's driving. How do you interact with it when you drive? And I think that's going to help guide us. And interaction is not necessarily being in the building, but how do you feel about it? How does it look? How does it catch your eye? So keep that in mind. Commissioner DeVette actually said Emeryville. Actually, Emeryville is a great example. Your friend said American Canyon's ugly on this street, and I'll agree, right? And we're trying to fix that. But Emeryville was ugly too. There's major railroads that go through there. It was a dump site with wetlands out front, right? I mean, like nobody, you just drove by there. I think we're all old enough in this room to remember the artwork that they had, the Snoopy playing and out there, all that kind of stuff. And you were just like, give me to San Francisco right away, right? But Emeryville has done a great job in building its city. It's only 2 square miles, but you drive around there, things are new, they're designed, and you interact with the city really well. And I think that's actually a model that we can actually think about and how we build things, because there's variety in there, there's traffic across their city, there's a railroad, right? And there's commerce that happens as well as livable communities, for sure. And I think that's it. And then I'm also really supportive of having professional help to look at all of this and then need it and probably put them on, on call on an ad hoc basis, looking at it as projects come through. Because I think we know what we want, and I think if we lay it out, once it gets to the Planning Commission, and this is your guys' work, is to hold these standards up and to do that. And I think it'll prevent from mistakes from like what we're seeing right now.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I would agree. I think the how we interact is important type of thing. How do you get around the city? This you got the Cove, and right next to it you've got Canyon Cafe. Well, they're going to get a lot of business when they reopen, but how do you get anywhere else? See, and I think as the sidewalks, the ability to connect with, say, Melvin, James Road, that side of the street, it's going to be an access point for a lot too. So we need to think about that in planning a lot down the range. I think there's an opportunity here. I think truly professional help would be applicable here as well. Who's got mic 6? Right. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. I'm going to just sort of try a little bit of a wrap up.
Okay.
For me, at least, and others may agree or disagree. But I'm going to start with this idea of professional help. I think there is a value to it, but I also have heard a few of the council members kind of say it's on us on the Planning Commission to kind of hold the line on some of this. And so I have no issue with that. But I do think it brings a couple of other things to mind. One, and you guys know that I have been an Brent, you certainly know I have advocated this for years. I think if that's the role, I think it becomes critical that at the beginning of each year, the city council and the planning commission have a joint, I don't care whether it's a meeting, a seminar, a get-together, whatever you want, to discuss the planning and the issues that are in front of us. Because we on the planning commission have been told in the past that the city council will have our back, and the city council did not. And I will talk to the specifics so everybody understands, and that's the food truck on, in the Broadway district.
Okay.
Okay? Because it was very clear at the time, city council did not want food trucks. So planning commission said, nope. There was an appeal to city council, and city council said, well, we changed our mind. That's a problem for me, okay? And so when I'm hearing, hey, you guys on the commission have to focus on this, we got your back, it's, well, do you? Because there's a very, I believe, valid example where that wasn't the case. So I get to be the bad guy once again because I'm good at doing that. And look, a lot of our applicants, they know if they're here routinely, they know they're going to get grilled, and they're going to have to answer with good answers. So that's one piece that I do want to get out there and address, and I think it becomes critical that we develop a calendar where near the beginning of the year, there is a meeting between Planning Commission and Council to discuss these issues so that we are aligned and these kinds of things don't happen in the future. The next thing I want to touch on is, part of the decision-making with this is we all have our own perceptions, and this is one of the things I think that'll benefit from a meeting as to what might look good. And I think the professional help, honestly, for me, isn't going to be so much for the commission or the council. It's really going to be for staff, because staff has to deal with all of these intermittent changes that they're getting asked to look at that don't need to come back to us, that we give staff the ability, and we should give staff the ability to run with. So they're having the ability to talk to an architect and say, hey, this is the change, this is, what do you think? Becomes really valuable. To me, that's less of a value for those of us sitting up here at the dais at this point, more for staff. I think additionally, when we're looking at all of this, and we're looking at how we work together and communicate, again, that's why at least an annual meeting is a help. And there's a lot of value, and I see it occasionally, but I think in council members sitting in on commission meetings, not all the time, but periodically. And I think, and I know I'm guilty of not doing what I am about to say, and I think we planning commissioners should be sitting in periodically. There's time constraints. I get it. I live it. On council meetings, whether it's in person or whether it's online, doesn't matter. But I do think it's important that we kind of work together better, and by having more interaction, it really, helps align us in a much better fashion to move forward on a singular mindset, on a singular, hey, this is it, this is what we're looking for. So kind of that's what I got at this point, and kind of just wanted to put out there. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, we had a great discussion this evening, and I thank you for all the input. It certainly helps us focus on things that we identify that we need to include in our deliberations, and certainly the support that's out there if we go seek it. And I do appreciate your comment on, I've attended, I don't know, a couple, 3 planning commission meetings. I think probably the big one was for Watson Ranch, the amphitheater. Wow. I mean, that's going to be an immense project. It's going to really brand American Canyon. And I think, what, public comment? Certainly, yeah. Public comment's open.
I just have a comment on Napa Cove. I notice they have a driveway, 2 driveways that are on the highway. I'm wondering, from what I understood, they didn't have an access. They're not supposed to go into the highway. Is that correct?
My friend. Actually, there's curb cuts for emergency access only.
That's what I was kind of wondering. I think that building is ugly, I'm sorry to say. But I think with the proper landscaping, it needs to really be something to take away the jail-like of the building. So whatever the landscaping is, I think they have to come up with something really spectacular to kind of soften that building. And then I'm wondering about the roof. Is anything up on top of that roof? Maybe they can have a bar up there or something. You know.
There you go.
It'd be a nice view.
Meeting
But
adjourned. We're going to the bar.
'cause the building, it looks like it's got a nice roof on top of there. But anyway, I agree. I don't know what happened. Beth and I sit here, and we never saw the design of that building.
It was during COVID, so we weren't.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what it was. We surely would have said something. But
Maybe
anyway, thank you.
I think maybe if you plant ivy, it can grow up on the sides and hide it. Yeah. Next speaker, please.
Beth Marcus, and I'm not going to harp on the jail. I just hope that the new project that's going on Crawford doesn't mimic that, because that would be a shame.
It's the brown one in the middle next to Chicken Guy.
Oh, is that what it's going to be? Okay. Because the other thing too is, I do have to have a comment on the Cove, Napa Cove, is I feel sorry for the holders because they're down here and there's people who can look into their residence, and I think they have an Airbnb in the back as well. And so that's you know, a bad thing for them. And I think that, well, it is known that they have Airbnb because they said it when we were having our meetings. Okay, you didn't hear it, okay.
I think that's a different kind of problem, but.
But also on Crawford, there's also homes there. And if there's 3 stories or whatever, it's going to affect them as well. You know, sometimes I think that the buildings are like glamour shots, you know, like when you go in and you look all pretty and everything, and it's not reality. But anyhow, I think this was a great meeting. I love this workshop. I feel really good about what's come out of it, and I'm looking forward to future things. Hopefully we learn from what has happened in the past and we can go forward, but I like the idea. I think a lot of it is the roofing. So anyhow, thank you for a great workshop. Thank you, Brent.
All right. Thank you. Any other comment? Anybody online?
One thing on the project on Crawford, the owners of that project, or the developers, have talked to one of the houses that is across from the post office, and they have told them that they're going to try to make it so they could shield them a little bit. So they did have a meeting.
So the Crawford applicant has been talking to the property owners, which is, that's, yeah, that's a very good thing. It is something that we ask all our applicants to do. And that one, I believe, does take that to heart. They also did too with our recommendation on the architecture. It is the one on the center of our page. When they met with us initially, we said, take a look across the street. Don't duplicate, but emulate that. Maybe make it a little more modern if you can. And I think they took that to heart.
Good. All right.
That feels interactable.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Very good discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I would second Commissioner Altman's comment about meeting at least once a year, maybe even twice, but definitely we need to synchronize because you guys need to know where our heads are at and know if our heads have been changing so you can get ahead of that curve.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great idea.
All right, good. All right. We've completed our work for the evening? Yes? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, American Canyon.
And many thanks to Kimmy. I know she traveled a long way to be here, and under short notice did a really excellent presentation that she put together. I'm very grateful for her and the team at RRM to help us tonight.
Our appreciation to RMM. Thank you for being here this evening, ma'am.
I do have one question, even though we've adjourned. Do we have a sense of direction?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. Yeah.